And it will be interesting, do we see a Jack Crisp or a Nick Dacos or even a Josh Dacos start rolling through the halfback flank with troopers coming in? The reason why I want Billy Frampton to remain in the side is because how well he competed against Max King earlier in the year. Sam Collins is an all-Australian caliber, key, tall defender this year. I think he's top 3 for intercept marks. So put Brody Meyer check on him, create a nuisance around Collins. Hopefully this is another game that can play a Darcy Moore into some really good form. Last time he played against Gold Coast last year, he had 20 disposals, 3 intercept marks, and had 5 coaches' votes. So first one is the fact that they're top 4 for inside 50s this year. However, they're bottom 4 for scoring shots per inside 50. Finally, the boys are back this Saturday against the Gold Coast Suns. Funnily enough, some of the boys went to Gold Coast to maybe acclimatise to the weather there during their bye week, while some went to Bali. Everyone's come back in one piece. No massive cases or accusations while they were away, so that's a positive. Let's get straight into the injury front of things and see where some of our players are at. It's come to light that players like Pendlebury, Myercheck and Markov will be all available, whereas Jordan De Goey and Joe Richards are a test. So we'll look at what the landscape looks like from a selection point of view later in the video, but really positive to see that we're starting to get the players back that we need going into this big stretch of games. Gold Coast, on the other hand, did not have Ben King for their game against Fremantle last week. They had Sam Day, who actually kicked 3 goals for the Suns, which will be interesting to see whether he remains in the side. But another selection matchup dilemma if Ben King does play, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So typically we do fare quite well against Gold Coast. We've won 9 of the last 10 against Gold Coast. I think our most recent loss was in that horrific 2021 season at the G on a Saturday afternoon. I remember that. That was such a dreadful game. It was so painful. I don't want to feel like that ever again. Now, last time we played Gold Coast was last year at Gold Coast in round 16, and we pumped them by 70 odd points. Some of the top performers were your Nick Dacos, who collected the full 10 coaches' votes, and John Noble had 30 disposals that game against Gold Coast, which is his second highest return in his career, his highest being back in 2021 against North, where he had 31. So a really good game for John Noble to come back into, considering he only had 8 touches against North Melbourne prior to the bye. He had 7 score involvements in the game against Gold Coast as well. So that's probably what we're hoping for from a certain John Noble. And we'll talk about our defensive half transition woes as well in this video, because I think that's going to be an important factor that will help decide where Collingwood and how deep Collingwood will go into this season. Hopefully this is another game that can play a Darcy Moore into some really good form. Last time he played against Gold Coast last year, he had 20 disposals, 3 intercept marks, and had 5 coaches' votes. So it's one of those games where we can just pray that maybe Darcy gets some sort of form, all-Australian form back that he had last year. And I think there's good reason to be optimistic that this is the type of game where Darcy Moore could bounce back. And we'll talk about that when we interpret Gold Coast's stats for the season and why I think Darcy Moore has a chance to sort of recapture some confidence. And lastly, some key score sources from that game. We absolutely butchered them in pretty much every facet that matters. Scores from stoppages, we were plus 15. Turnovers, we scored 75 points, where typically the AFL average is 48 points, so 5 goals better than what is the average. And then we also scored 70 points from defensive half transition, where the AFL average is 32 points. So hopefully we can emulate some of that stuff against Gold Coast on the weekend. Looking at Gold Coast season at current and some of the stats that really spring out to me. First one is the fact that they're top 4 for inside 50s this year. However, they're bottom 4 for scoring shots per inside 50. So they're only scoring 40% of the time they enter their inside 50s, which means obviously something's not working, whether it's the connection with the midfielders to the forwards, the leading patterns aren't there, or just the way they're building up isn't great. And that's why I think this is a real opportunity for a Collingwood side defensively to have a real field day in the rebound 50s and intercept marking, because of the poor quality that Gold Coast provide their forwards going inside 50. It invites players like Darcy Moore, Jeremy Howe if he plays in the back line, Billy Frampton to really, I guess, thrive with their intercept marking prowess and get the ball rolling going back the other way. So that's my case when it comes to Darcy Moore. having an opportunity to rebuild some confidence. Another conflicting stat is the fact that Gold Coast are a top 2 scoring side when it comes to centre bounce differential. However, they're also top 2 from conceding within that score source. So it goes both ways with Gold Coast when it comes to scoring from a centre bounce origin. It will be interesting around the stoppages as Gold Coast defend quite well from that source, being a top 3 side, and Collingwood have been a really good side scoring from stoppages this year. When you have Nick Dacos floating around, Jordan De Goey hopefully, even Scott Pendlebury this year, these guys look to score from the stoppages, particularly in our forward 50. So that will be an interesting watch for you guys, or for all of us really. And I guess while they have such poor quality going inside 50, it's probably the sheer amount of volume that they get being a top 4 side for inside 50s probably helps them remain a competitive side. But the other tail to the story is their defensive ability. They're a top 3 differential side for intercept marks in the league. So you've got players like Sam Collins, Ballard, Will Powell, who really do well to hold down the fortress in the back line and give themselves every chance to stay in the game with their defensive ability. Looking at the Gold Coast Suns game against Freo in Perth, and we know that the Suns have not won a game away from home, so that is something to take with a grain of salt when we consider how Suns perform away from home versus when at home. They're 2 different sides, admittedly, and it's clear. But Suns were accurate for the most part of the game, which kept them within the game, whereas Freo were quite wasteful. I think they kicked 12 goals, 13 behinds, whereas Gold Coast had something like 10 goals, 5 behinds. So it really kept them in the game. They were well beaten in clearance and stoppages against the really good Freo side that are the number 1 clearance and stoppage sides, which we saw against Collingwood over in Perth. So it comes to no surprises that was always going to be a challenge away from home for Gold Coast. And it's worth noting that all the coaches' votes that were allotted in that game went to the 3 midfielders, Sarong, Brayshaw, O'Meara, and someone else that people are going to hate me for forgetting. Did I say Brayshaw? Never mind. And then also Sam Darcy as well. Oh, Sean Darcy as well. So the whole midfield and their ruck stocks all got coaches' votes. So hopefully, if we can narrow down and really point to, hey, this is where the game is won, then we can have a similar result that Freo got against Gold Coast. And just talking to Gold Coast's efficiencies when they did have shots on goal that game, Gold Coast had 12 shots between 15 to 30 metres out from goal and only missed 1 shot. They kicked 11 goals, so a really good return there. Whereas Freo missed 9 shots in front of goal within that same range. So that's the argument there to suggest that the game could have looked different. I know the score is a score and good kicking is good footy, but you've just got to consider that Gold Coast probably were made to look a little bit better than what the game could have, or how the game could have finished on the scoreboard, if not for their dead-eye kicking in front of goal. Moving into the selection talk and the fringe players, and the first player I want to talk about is Reef McInnes. And Caleb and I mentioned him in the podcast. What's it going to take for Reef McInnes to get that full-time position in the squad? Averaging close to 2 goals per game, coming on as a sub as well, so that sort of affects his ability to impact the scoreboard. But when he is coming on and when he is playing full games, he is impacting the scoreboard. But it's just a matter of when everyone's healthy going into the final series, can we assign him a full-time spot in the team? And I don't know if we can do that. I'm looking at players like Joe Richards, who comes back in, Jordan De Goey, Brody Myercheck this week. It's going to be tough. It really is. Because for me, you could either say Reef is a straight swap for a Joe Richards. I know they're different sizes, but Reef needs to be able to have the ability to play smaller because he's not a massive key forward, but also have the ability to play like a Jordan De Goey. So I've gone with Reef out, Richards in, potentially, if available. And then I've got, instead of Jordan De Goey in for Reef, I've got Jordan De Goey in for a Lockie Sullivan. And then, like I said, and then Jordan De Goey will get his rest forward, maybe a 50-50 split, maybe even more. Against Adelaide, he didn't have a single centre bounce attendance. So that's why I think Reef's spot is in jeopardy, along with Lockie Sullivan, particularly if Pendles is in as well. I think that pretty much spells the story for Lockie Sullivan. He'll probably go back to the VFL at this point. That's my hunch. And then we've got Brody Myercheck. Now, I think Charlie Dean could be in trouble because with the success that we saw with Jeremy House swinging forward and returning Billy Frampton back into the back line, which we've been all begging for. It finally happened in the second half against North Melbourne. I think Dean's in trouble because I think with the success we had with Frampton going into the back line in that second half and what we've seen from him for the large part of the season, I think Frampton goes back there. Dean could be in trouble. My check comes in. I don't know who else you can take out. You're not taking out Kruger, and I don't know who else there is to fit a my check in without taking out a Charlie Dean. The other case that could be made is you just go straight swap my check for Frampton. I don't know. I think if Jeremy Howe's going to reside in a forward line, I think Frampton in the back line is a must, and it helps with the matchups. It allows Darcy Moore to express himself more freely across the field as that intercept player. The other interesting one is with Pendlebury, who comes out for Scotty in this case. Maybe TJ, and then we move the magnets and accommodate for TJ coming out and who can play in that half-back flank position where TJ occupied in his game against North. So that's something I'm not too sure about, but that just off the top of my head, that's maybe not a like-for-like swap, but it's someone who needs to come out for someone who definitely needs to come in a Pendlebury, and then we'll figure out within the existing side who can play in the role that TJ played on the weekend. Look, I'd love TJ to remain in the side and really bleed him in and give him an opportunity to imprint himself into the side and rolling into the final series. That would be my hope. It's not rational. I would just love to see us fast track his progress, but at the same time I understand that maybe that's not realistic given the context of where we're at this season. And guys, actually just quickly, just regarding the selection talk, Finlay Macrae will probably be an obvious out for Pendlebury. And if Oleg Markov was to come back in and TJ goes out, but in saying that, if it came down to a Markov or a TJ, I'd probably keep TJ in right now, seeing as Pendlebury can come straight in for a Finlay Macrae who was subbed out at halftime. And how do Collingwood win against Gold Coast? I've been ranting on about this for the last couple of weeks. It's the defensive half transition. Guys, get used to this. Collingwood are a bottom four side moving the ball from one end to the other, from defensive half to the forward half and scoring, right? Bottom four, along with North Melbourne, Richmond, West Coast, okay? In the last 4 years, all grand finalists, so not just the premiers, also the runner-ups, they have all been top four defensive half side teams. Melbourne and the Bulldogs, Geelong and Sydney, Collingwood and Brisbane, all great sides in their time moving from one end to the other. We scored 60 points against North Melbourne, so that's a good start. And to carry that on into this game against Gold Coast would be massive. And it will be interesting. Do we see a Jack Crisp or a Nick Dacos or even a Josh Dacos start rolling through the half-back flank with troopers coming in Pendlebury and De Goey and maybe a Tom Mitchell later at some point of the season? It allows us to get more movement and, I guess, fluidity or fluency from the half-back flank. I think John Noble's held his own, but he needs a partner. He doesn't have a partner right now to do the dance and get us out from end to end. So that will be an interesting one as the season progresses. Just remember, Gold Coast are on the cusp of, I guess, missing out on finals once again. So this is almost as if it's an elimination final for Gold Coast, sitting in 12th position right now. I think there might be a game or two out from the 8. So it's a must-win. And lo and behold, it's another grand final that Collingwood are playing against, who their opposition really need to win in. So that's just standard these days, standard procedure, standard practice. It is what it is. It calls for a great game for the neutral viewer, but hopefully Collingwood can overcome the heat that Gold Coast bring, particularly early in the contest, tackling pressure. I think they had 70 tackles against Freo, while Freo also had 70 tackles as well. So that's a high count for tackling. So hopefully, Collingwood can overcome any sort of early pressure that Gold Coast look to heap on Collingwood early in the game. Matchups, well, we know the midfield battle is going to be massive. It's the Sarongs, it's the Brayshaws, and I remember who I forgot before, it was Hayden Young. You got Nathan Fyfe rolling through, Jago O'Meara rolling through, against your Nick Dacos, your Jack Crisp, your Scott Pendlebury, your Josh Dacos, Lipinski, De Goey maybe. We'll see. So I think that largely is where the game will be won and lost, from the stoppages, from the clearances, the scoring sources from centre bounce. These things will play a massive factor, as they typically do anyways in most games, but more so this game than many others. Sam Collins is an All-Australian calibre key tall defender this year. I think he's top 3 for intercept marks. So put Brody Myercheck on him, create a nuisance around Collins, block his runs from the intercepting situations, and yeah, no tougher role for Myercheck to return to, seeing as he will be coming up against a Sam Collins. And maybe Nathan Kruger can give Collins some dramas as well, but then we got Hayden Ballard and Will Power that we'll also need to consider. As far as the halfback flank is concerned for Gold Coast, you've got Sam Flanders, who's been amazing this year, is probably also in All-Australian contention, averaging over 30 disposals per game, is a real connector, a bit of a seagull when it comes to collecting the footy. So you give him a Lockie Schultz and a Beau McCreary to run with, like a run with tag. So I wouldn't say a tagging role, but more of a run with sort of style, sort of match up there. So keep an eye on that for sure. The reason why I want Billy Frampton to remain in the side is because how well he competed against Max King earlier in the year. So get Billy Frampton on Ben King if Ben King plays, and then Darcy Moore plays loose and hopefully returns to some intercepting form. So that's my case for Billy Frampton to remain in the team and, more importantly, in the backline. Jared Witts versus Darcy Cameron will always be an interesting one. You know Jared Witts takes these games against Collingwood very personally, seeing as he couldn't crack into the side while Brodie Grundy was dominating that number 1 spot. Darcy Cameron's been unbelievable around the grounds, marking the ball. We know that. Jared Witts probably has even more of a point to prove. He's the skipper of the club. But you've just had Ned Moyle, who's just signed on for another 2 years, who's their backup ruckman, who's really growing in stature and building confidence. It's an interesting one with Ned Moyle signing on for another 2 years. Maybe they see Jared Witts transitioning out, maybe giving up his captaincy next year to really allow the transition and really nurture Ned Moyle into the team. Otherwise, it wouldn't have made sense to me. I was hoping Ned Moyle would be available in free agency and maybe come to Collingwood and entertain that idea. It would allow Darcy Cameron to play more ruck forward role, and pinch hit, and Ned Moyle could be that full-time ruckman, having played for Collingwood's VFL side as well. So I thought a lot of dots were connected, and it really suggested that there was a chance we could get Ned Moyle. Not to be, he's signed on, he's staying there, fair enough, it is what it is. But as I said, massive game for Darcy Cameron, as it always will be, with the majority of the ruck responsibilities laying on his shoulders, while there is no Cox in the team, while there is no, Cox really. You got Kruger who can pinch hit here and there. McStay, if he comes in, I wouldn't be putting him in the ruck given his ACL injury as well, so there's probably no chance that happens. And Billy Frampton's probably too slender for being able to pinch hit in the ruck, even though he has done that in the past. I'm also really keen to see Nathan Kruger continue to build his form and kick another couple goals, maybe 2 or 3 on the weekend. Keep up his tackling pressure, averaging 2.5 tackles per game inside 50 across the 2 games he's played, which if he was to maintain that, he'd be the number 1 tackling forward out of all sizes, small, medium and tall, across the entire league. So that's really surprised me. I don't know about you guys, but his speed across the ground at ground level has really impressed me, and that's what I love about him. And he does really provide a genuine aerial threat. You feel like if he gets a good run at it, he can jump on someone's head and take a strong mark. We've seen that already. He's been accurate in front of goal, he's got good energy, and he's going to be a really good supporting cast to someone like Myercheck and McStay. I think it does keep out Mason Cox if it does pan out that way. And ideally for me, Myercheck, McStay, Kruger are our 3 key talls. I don't think we can go any taller than that with Darcy Cameron as well, because we have so many elite small forwards who have been providing so much this year. Lockie Schultz is averaging 1.5 goals. Bobby Hill, same, 1.5 goals. We've still got Billy Elliott to come, who plays tall at times as well. And then you've got Beau McCreary and Joe Richards. So there really is a lot of variables and players we need to consider how we can squeeze them in at the end of the year if everybody's healthy, and knock on wood, everyone is healthy, because we're going to have some fucking selection headaches at the table when it comes to crunch time. So I do not fathom being in McRae's position moving into the finals. Anyways, that's it, guys. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys on Moving the Magnets tomorrow night. And for the pre-game show, the watch-along, yes, we'll be watching the game live together, the post-game show, and hopefully we can celebrate a win in that post-game show. Go Pies.